Good evening, good evening, good evening. Here we go. Locked and loaded. So glad that you are here tonight. With new teacher, Big Impact, the live experience. I'm your host, former terrible teacher turned two-time teacher of the year, Darrell Williams Jr. But let me know who you are. Let me know who we've got here with us. I need to know who that is. I'm looking around. I'm seeing I want to maximize this. There we go. Come on. Then let it take up the full screen. You got it. All right, I'm here live and in person. I'm looking in the chat to see where we go. Houston, Texas. Shout out to you. Shout out and Weston. Let me know your name. I would love to use it while we're on the call tonight. N, unless you just want me to call you N, I can do that as well. But shout out. I'll be in Texas in a couple of days. Actually, I'm going to Cedar Park. So it's funny. So I thought about flying into Houston because the tickets from Charlotte to Austin were so expensive. Charlotte to Houston is not that expensive. So I was like, I'm gonna go to Houston and then drive 3 hours to Cedar Park. And then my mind was like, no, don't do that. So I just bought the more expensive ticket, but I'm going to Cedar Park. So shout out, I'll be in your neck of the woods. Pumpkin pie, what's going on from Detroit? Shout out to you. Shout out to you all. I don't know if I should tell you this, but I'm actually an Eagles fan. So, but look, my heart goes out to the Detroit Lions. I wanted you to do well this year. I didn't want you to do better than us, but I wanted you to do well. But I really believe that Detroit got something special. But shout out to y'all, man. Listen, we have 6 people here live and watching, and I'm just glad that you are here. Do you even know what we're speaking about? Well, every single week I go live and I bring a new topic. So if this is your first time, I just want to let you know that you can expect every single week for me to go live and to present a new topic. Tonight, we're talking about supporting neurodivergent learners in our general education classrooms. Yeah, I'm going there, right? So every week there's something new that we are talking about, right? All right. And I just want to make sure that you are ready to go. So shout out to you if you're ready. I see, you love the Lions good. I love them too, just not as much as the Eagles. All right, Nina, I got you locked in. Okay. So, yes, I'm not taking that 3 hour drive. So I'm definitely not doing that. If it's your first time here, I just want to let you know that we are going to be, if it's your first time here, stay along, ask questions. The way that you're using the chat already, I have it up on my screen. I'm able to look at it to answer questions and all those types of things. Ask whatever questions you would like. Be engaged. All those types of things, and we're gonna have an amazingly fun experience. And if you are liking it at any point, just hit the like button. Like that'll be awesome. And definitely give it a like, a share, subscribe. If this is your second time, like if you've been here before and you're on another call, it's definitely time to subscribe. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and you'll be notified every week when we go live and things like that. Sending one of our Impact members, shout out to you. It's funny. I can always count on 1 or 2 Impact members to come and support. So shout out to you. Impact is our educated community. And Jasenia, we were just talking earlier today, so you can still ask questions here. We do have an Impact live event in a couple of minutes. I mean, right after this, 7:30 is exclusive just for Impact. So Jasenia, you can ask your questions then as well. Either one, it doesn't matter. But here we go. We're talking about supporting neurodivergent learners in general education classrooms. And I already told you who I am. I'm Darrell Williams Jr., former terrible teacher turned two-time teacher of the year. And now I help new teachers become the teachers that they've always wanted to be and make the impact that they've always wanted to make. So if that's you, you're in the right place. It's funny because people always ask me, what even is a new teacher? A new teacher doesn't mean that you just left college. A new teacher means, sorry, that you are somebody that is experiencing newness in this year, whether it's a new class, new grade level, new curriculum, new administration. If you are experiencing some newness, you sometimes feel like a new teacher. All right, so if you're in the right place, lock in, get settled in. We're diving into this thing, and we're starting with a debate that needs to be settled. It's something that has been very popular over recent years, and people can't seem to decide on it. There's so many people on the far side. There's so many people on the close. Like there's so many people on this side, so many people on that side, and we just can't seem to, as a nation, agree on this one particular thing. And the question that we really have to answer is, which one is better? Is it Apple or is it Android? Which one is better, Apple or Android? I know that Apple, you've got the sleek design, you've got the glass back, right? You've got the name, the iPhone name, but then Android is more customizable. I've heard you got better cameras, right? Which one is better, Apple or iPhone? It's funny. Sorry, Apple or Android. It's funny because a couple of years ago, when I was in college, there were so many other options. There was Apple, there was Android, there was Windows, there was a BlackBerry, right? There are so many different operating systems, but right now it's really just the main two, right? So let me know in the comment section. Let me know in the chat. What do you support? Nina, let me know like what is it that we're going with? Is it Apple? Is it Android? Are we? Does it even matter? Right? Some people say it doesn't even matter as long as my phone works, right? But let me know what it is that you think. And I'll tell you the story. So when I was in college, like I said, there were a lot of different popular operating systems, but again, the two popular were Apple and Android. My friend in my suite, he had an Apple device. So we were in college, it was about 2012, and he had an Apple device. This is when touchscreens were just becoming really, really ubiquitous, right? But you can still have some non-touch screens, when I was heading into college in 2010. But by 2012, we were pretty much like everybody was having a touchscreen phone, no keyboards and things like that. So he had the iPhone and he had this game called Subway Surfer. Anybody remember Subway Surfer? I know it's still a game, right? So he had this game Subway Surfer, and what we would do is we would all sit around the dorm room and we would give him he would give us turns using his phone to play Subway Surfer, right? Like we would all just um pass the phone around and play Subway Surfer. In that game, it's like you have to swipe, you have to jump. It was this guy running down the subway. But us people that had Androids or Windows or Blackberries and things like that, we couldn't play that game. We couldn't play Subway Surfer, right? So Michelle, you're saying it doesn't matter, but at that time it did. At that time, I wanted to play Subway Surfer and I couldn't. But watch this: the developers of the game, the app developers of Subway Surfer, they realized that they were missing out on some audience members because they were not um, accessible by all of the operating systems. They weren't accessible by all the different operating systems. So the app developers then developed Subway Surfer on Android. What are we talking about, Daryl? Look, I'm not just giving you an Apple and Android breakdown. Watch this. The app developers realized that there were two different operating systems. And though they developed an app for one operating system, those that had a device with another operating system could not process that app and they would not be able to access it. So it was leaving a subset of buyers that were disappointed, frustrated, stressed out because they couldn't have access to something that somebody else had just because they had different operating systems. And what I'm saying is, when we're thinking about neurodivergent learners in our classrooms, there are neurodivergent learners and neurotypical learners, and both of them are capable of doing amazing things. Both of them are capable of acquiring information, of understanding the information, of comprehending the information, of retaining the information. But what happens is sometimes the teacher or the app developer only creates lessons for one type of operating system. So to ask the question, which is better, Apple or Android, there isn't one is not better, they're just different. And when we're thinking about neurodiversity in the classroom, one is not better, it's just different. And what our job is as educators in the classroom is to think about it just like the app developers did and say, wow, if I only target one type of processing system, then what happens is I'm completely ignoring a whole subset of buyer that would want to do well in my class, right? That would want to be successful. That's why it's so important to address the neurodiversity in our classroom. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that you get it. And one is not better than the other, they are just different. So, what we are going to unpack here today is just that. I need to make sure that you are ready, that you are locked and loaded, and that you are ready to really get this thing. Okay. So if you're all ready, put a ready sign in the chat. put a thumbs up, give me a clap, give me something to show me that you are ready to learn how to support these neurodiverse learners in your classroom. Okay. So you may have neurodiverse learners in your classroom and you don't know how to support, but they have their IEP, they have their 504, they have accommodation and modifications, and that's still not working. But that's because paperwork is not the solution. But there are actually simple moves that you can make as an educator in your general education classroom that will make your class the perfect place for even our neurodivergent learners. That's why in this video, you're going to learn how to support neurodiversity in the classroom in your general education classroom. All right, let's do it. And I actually put the wrong, I was trying to do an intro. I'm giving it to you one more time. I clicked on the wrong button. I can't. This is the button I was supposed to click. That's what was supposed to pop up, but I didn't click on the right button, so I have to give it to you one more time. Is that okay if I give it to you just one more time? Stumbled over my words a little bit there, and I didn't really want to do that. I'm gonna give it to you one more time, and we will make this thing happen. Okay. You may have neurodiverse learners in your classroom that you don't know how to support. And they may have their IEP or 504, the combination of modifications, and you're saying they're not working because paperwork is not going to be the solution. But there are simple moves that you can make as a general education classroom teacher that will make your classroom the perfect place to support neurodiversity in learning. That's why in this video, you are going to learn how to support neurodiverse learners in general education classrooms so that students can acquire, comprehend, and retain the information. So as we dive into it, there are a couple of definitions that you need to know before we get too deep. All right, some of these definitions even tripped me up a little bit, but you're going to hear it as we talk through it. So first of all, when we say neurodiversity, what is it that we mean? Well, when we say neurodiversity, what we're meaning is this is the idea that people experience and interact with the world around us in many different ways, right? So when we're saying neurodiversity, we're saying that there's different ways of processing information in all different learning styles and in all different brains. So that's what we mean when we're saying neurodiversity. It's kind of the umbrella term. When we say neurodivergent, now we're specifically talking about those students whose brains process information differently from what we consider to be typical. And when we say neurotypical, what we're meaning is people whose brains process information in a way that people do consider it to be typical. Right. So when we think about these definitions, you'll hear again, neurodiversity is the broad overarching umbrella that is saying this is all brains process information in different ways. But when we say neurodivergent, that's what we're saying, okay, that is processing information in a way that we don't consider it to be typical, but neurotypical is processing information in a way that we do consider to be typical. Okay, so understand those definitions as we dive into what we're talking about with supporting neurodiverse learners in their classroom. Because if we can be honest, we don't know how to address neurodiversity. I'm just going to call it out. I'm just going to put it out there. We're just going to be honest with it. No shame in it. We don't really know how to support neurodiversity, right? And here's how I know that we don't know how to support neurodiversity. And here's what happens as a result. When we don't know how to support neurodiversity, what happens is there are missed opportunities for student growth. Why? Because we're not giving students what they need in order to be successful. So when we don't know how to support neurodiversity, sometimes what happens is we just ignore the fact that students learn in different ways and we only teach one particular way. Can we be honest? Is that anybody that we kind of just teach in one particular way? And because we're teaching in one particular way, we just expect that students are going to be able to get it when in actuality, that may not actually be helpful. And if we're just teaching in one particular way, sometimes what happens is we just teach in the way that we like to learn. As the teacher, we say, because I like to learn this way, I'm going to teach this way. But now you're only speaking to students that learn in the way that you learn. So again, that's why we're missing out on opportunities for student growth. Then another issue with not understanding how to address neurodiversity is that we sometimes misinterpret student misbehavior. So what happens there is that we end up punishing students for things that they can't even control. We end up misinterpreting their behavior and saying that the reason or they're doing something that maybe a manifestation of their disability, and now we're holding them accountable and giving them consequences for things that they can't control, rather than understanding that and being proactive so that those behaviors are exhibited less. Is that making sense? And that's not what we want for any student in the classroom, right? But then also watch what happens as a result. So then there's increased stress and anxiety from the students. Because imagine they're coming into our classrooms and they're feeling like they, listen, if I do this, I'm going to get in trouble. I'm going to get a consequence. The teacher is just ignoring me. She's not really addressing my needs. I'm confused and asking questions, and I answer my questions, or I don't know what's going on, or she's using a lot of words. It's hard for me to comprehend. Because when we think about neurodivergent learners, we're talking about things like students that have autism, or we're talking about ADHD, or we're talking about dyslexia. We're talking about brains processing information in different ways. And if I'm a student in that classroom that's suffering from one of these disabilities, and I'm trying to follow along and pay attention, and you're not cognizant of the needs that I have, now I'm starting to feel unsafe, and it leads to increased stress and anxiety in the classroom. And when we think about all of these things, what we end up ultimately thinking when we recognize that we don't know how to address neurodiversity, the question that comes to the mind of all of us is, how will I ever make sure that every student reaches their full potential? If you're a teacher that's saying you want every single student to reach their full potential, how can you ever make sure that every student is going to reach their full potential if you don't understand how to support and address neurodiversity in your classroom? If you can only teach to one subset of student, how can you make sure that every student is learning? The example I like to give is when we talk about Apple versus Android. If you remember when Apple and Android, kind of first came out, there were sometimes apps that were just for Apple, sometimes apps that were just for Android, and developers started saying, "How about we release apps so that everybody can have access to it?" What would it look like if they said there's only Android apps, right? Only Apple apps? That company will be missing out on a whole lot of money, and those consumers will be missing out on the applications because they don't have the right processing system. So that's why developers got smart and said, we're going to create for both processing systems, and we should do the same in our class. Whether they're neurodivergent, whether they're neurotypical, we need to make sure that every student is reaching their full potential by designing lessons and creating an environment that is capable of supporting neurodiverse learning styles. And it's really not that hard, because all we've got to do is create an environment that is designed for diverse learning styles. And that's what I'm going to show you right here, right now, how to create an environment that is designed for diverse learning styles. So if you're ready, let me know. We're getting deep into it. I see Ksenia is ready. I already know you're going to be ready. All right, we're always ready. Absolutely. I love it. These are the simple things that you have to do in order to create the environment that supports diverse learners. And it's not as hard as you think. It's interesting because one of the reasons why we actually don't do this is because we think that it's the specialist job to handle neurodiverse learners. Can I be honest with you all? Listen, I tell you all the time that I was a terrible teacher. And I don't say that lightly. I really was. There were a lot of things that I was missing out on. There was a lot of things that I was doing incorrectly. And I was a terrible teacher. One of the things that I was doing wrong when I was a terrible teacher was I was not addressing neurodiversity in my classroom. I wasn't. I can be honest. If you listen, if you promise not to judge me, I'll let you know. Like, I can remember that there were students that had disabilities or had designations, and they were in class, and I assumed that because there was an IEP, because there was some sort of 504, because they needed accommodations and modifications, I assumed that that meant that they were less capable. So what I would do in my middle school math class is sometimes I would circumvent those students and telling myself they're not going to get it anyway. I'm not going to ask you to admit if that's you. I'm not going to ask you to put yourself in the chat, but I'm just being honest, vulnerable, and transparent. That's where I was. I didn't understand enough to know better. And I said, oh, this student, okay, he's not going to be able to get it. Like, they'll ask questions, and I was like, hold on. And I'll go help another student who I thought would be able to get it. And I said, well, this student's not going to be able to get it. I don't even need to answer that question. Can I be honest? I'm sorry. It was wrong. And I don't want you to make the same mistakes that I do. Sometimes we think that it takes a specialist to handle neurodivergent learners. I'll say that's not for me. That's for the EC department. That's for the special ed team. Right? He's just in class right now because he has to be based off of the IEP, IDEA. He just has to be my classroom, but he's not really going to learn. It's not. He's not going to make a difference. Like those were the things that I was thinking. Let me know if any of us thought of any of these things. Some students are showing behaviors, and we're saying, "I'm not certified to deal with this. That's not. That's not what I'm here for." Right? A student has the paperwork, they have the documentation, and they're still showing behavior, and they're saying, listen, the IEP is not working. He's still, she's still, they're still, right? Or the worst one, this was me. How many of us see the differences and we say they're different and that's okay and ignore. But I need you to understand that there are things that you can do as a classroom teacher that are going to help make that student feel supported in your classroom. And you do not have to be a specialist. You do not have to go back to school and get a degree. You're right. You don't have to get a master's in special education. But these are simple things that you can do in your classroom to help support neurodivergent learners. And what we're going to do is create a neurodivergent friendly classroom. There are three things I'm going to cover in this video. And full transparency, this these are three things that I'm pulling out from a full complete course that I just recorded that actually lives inside of Impact. And again, if you don't know what Impact is, that is our new teacher community that features courses, community, and coaching. And there are courses released every single month. There's a thriving community where you can ask questions, feel supported, and there's coaching from me and other Impact coaches that are going to help support you along the way to make sure that you have the support that you need. And the course that we're releasing, the feature course of this month, is creating a neurodivergent friendly classroom so that you can support your neurodiverse learners even in your general education classrooms so they can receive, retain, and understand the information. But here are three things that you can do today. You know, I always want to make sure when I do videos, I would give you a nice bite-sized chunk that you can manage right now. The three things that you can do today are: you can understand the universal design for learning. You can understand the structure in a sensory you can understand how to structure in a sensory friendly classroom, and you can understand clear communication strategies. All right, so I'm just going to break that down for you right now. We're going to first dive into the universal design for learning, which sometimes is just called UDL. And inside of the impact community, we actually have a full workbook that breaks down everything that I'm talking about right now. That is completely free for all of our subscribers inside the impact community. And if you're interested in it, the link is actually already in the description down below to join impact. But when we talk about the universal design for learning, there are three core principles that the universal design for learning is built on. And we're talking about how to show multiple ways of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. Now, the universal design for learning is not something that I created. This is not Darrell Williams Jr. This was made popular back in the 1990s. And we're talking again about neurodiversity. And the reason why I want to start with this UDL is because this is not specifically focused on neurodivergent learners. The other two that we'll get into in a moment when we start talking about sensory friendly classrooms and things like that, that's specifically for supporting our neurodivergent learners. Remember the definitions we covered earlier. But when we talk about the umbrella of neurodiversity, what this is saying is, how can we make sure that every student is accessing information in a way that is empowering them to attain, understand, and retain the information? So what we're going to do is design lessons and feature activities in our classroom that have multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. Multiple means of engagement, what does that mean? There are so many different ways that students are interested and engaged in things. Right? There's so many different things that interest students. Some students are interested by anime. Some students are interested by writing. Some students are reading. Some students are kinesthetic, need to get up and move around. Right? There's so many different things that engage learners. And if we only feature one particular way, we're only addressing one particular learning style. So if we feature multiple ways of engagement, engagement through technology, engagement through books, engagement through written work, right? If we engage in a myriad of ways, what we're doing is we're opening up a plethora of learning styles to be able to receive that information. Is that making sense? So the action step I want you to start thinking about is, how can I engage learners in multiple ways. What's another way that I can engage? Maybe this week we incorporate some technology. Maybe this week we incorporate a drawing or writing activity. Maybe this week we use a popular television show, whatever it is. But I'm thinking I'm intentionally trying to engage students in different ways than I currently am. Another pillar of UDL is multiple means of representation. So what that means is we're going to represent information in different ways. So how are we going to represent the information in different ways? What does that mean? Well, sometimes it means that it's going to be written. Sometimes it's going to mean that it is when you write it on the board, you're also going to show a picture. There's also going to be a video. There's some music that goes along with it. We're not just going to give the definitions, we're going to wrap the definitions, right? We're going to represent in a couple of different ways. That's what the multiple means of representation means. Now, lastly, multiple means of action and expression. What that means is there's a lot of different ways for students to show that they have learned information, right? So it's not always a standardized test. It's not always a quiz. How else can students show that they've learned? Can students show through a project? Can they show through a skit? Can they show through an essay? Can they create a podcast? Can they show through a video? Can they create an ad? You know what I'm saying? There's so many different ways that students can show what they've learned that may be not necessarily typical, but it's going to rely on the strengths that they have. Neurodiverse learners have so many different strengths because neurodiverse learners are every learner that we have. So there are many different strengths, and there are ways that they can demonstrate their knowledge and skills in ways that we may not necessarily always think about. All right, so as you're thinking about this first pillar, or as you're thinking about this first guide, the universal design for learning is where we want to start so that we can support neurodiversity because every student needs to understand that. Is that all right? Okay, I got it. You're there. So now I said the next thing that we're going to talk about is we're going to dive into making sure that we have a sensory friendly classroom. A sensory friendly classroom. What do we mean by that? Well, now we're getting into talking about more of the neurodivergent learners. And with the neurodivergent learners, now we have a classroom that is appealing to their senses because there are some times in which they are overwhelmed by some of their senses. And I will get to the sensory friendly classroom. Here we go. Boom. We're going to get to the sensory friendly classroom right after this. All right. Full transparency, my laptop was about to die. Nobody wanted to see that. So here we go. Sensory friendly classrooms. I don't want to lose you all. All right. So, sensory friendly classrooms. What that means is we are going to create an environment that is not overwhelming for students that are neurodivergent. So, as we're looking into our sensory friendly classrooms, here are some of the things that we can do. One, one of the things that is very helpful is structure. So, when there's predictability, it really aids in our neurodivergent learners being able to feel safe and comfortable in the classroom. So, one of the things that we can definitely do is have clear structures and routines. So, for example, if you know we're going to recess every day at 11:30, and after recess there's lunch and then we have specials, it'll be great to have an agenda on the board so that our neurodivergent learners can see what to expect, and then once it happens, then they're ready to go. So you can take it one step further by showing an overview of the week, right? I've seen some teachers have just kind of a weekly agenda on the board. Not every single, not accounting for every single minute, but just an overview of here are the specials we had this week. Monday is music, Tuesday is art, right? Right? Things like that. Because again, our neurodivergent learners thrive in structure and predictability. So they know what's going to happen. They feel a lot more safe and comfortable. But also, what that means for us is also to make sure that if there's something that is going to throw us off the routine, throw us off the structure, that we make sure that we prepare students, right, by calling it out. So we're going to prepare students by letting them know ahead of time, hey, today there's a fire drill. Like if there's a fire drill, or we're gonna have a shelter in place drill, or we're not gonna go to specials today because there's an assembly, things like that. So if we just let them know ahead of time that things are going to change, that can mitigate a lot of the behaviors that we were talking about earlier before they even begin. So that is a great way to help our students feel safe and comfortable in the classroom with predictability. Another great way is sensory awareness, right? So again, we're talking about neurodivergent learners, and specifically right now, we're thinking about students with autism, where they are very sensitive to stimuli. So bright lights, right? Loud noises, crowded spaces. So a lot of these sometimes cause distress. So being cognizant of that, what I've seen a lot of teachers do is we're allowed, they were not using the overhead lights. Maybe we turn the overhead lights off and I have lamps around my classroom because I don't want to use the bright, harsh lights, but we'll just use some softer lights, right? Because I don't want you to become overstimulated. Um, Classroom management now comes into play because rather than having this loud, aggressive, sharp noises class, we can maintain a voice level too, right? So that our friends don't get overwhelmed with that excess stimuli. So things like this and avoiding like flashing lights and things like that are very helpful. Again, with the predictability, if I'm going to play music, I'm going to play sound or playing a video that has, a loud clap or something that is aggressive or abrasive, I'll definitely let some of our neurodivergent learners know, hey, just let you know this is going to happen. And if you need to step out, that's okay. Or just want to let you know that this is going to happen in a couple of minutes. But another great option for that is to have calming spaces where we can provide things like noise canceling headphones, like fidget tools, or soft things that they can, blankets or soft materials that they can touch for those sensory, or a quiet zone, or a cool down corner, if you would, right? So having this available in the classroom is also something that is going to be able to aid with students that sometimes get overwhelmed with a lot of stimuli. All right. So that was a lot. Those are a lot of words. I'll put it on the screen to make sure that you can see it. But is that making sense? Do we see how by creating a sensory friendly classroom, what we can do is we can actually mitigate a lot of the issues before they rise. And if you have questions, you can definitely let me know in the chat. But you can see all the things on the screen, and I'll just share a story with you really quickly. I remember a student that we had not too long ago, and he was a neurodivergent learner, and the teacher was in the classroom. She was a newer teacher and not really dealt with these types of students before. And it was a general education classroom. It was a third grade classroom, and I can remember that there was a time in which they were going to miss recess, and sometimes when it was raining outside, we wouldn't go for recess, right? And uh, she told the class that they wouldn't be able to go to recess, and he just had a meltdown. He started screaming, throwing things, yelling, and all those types of things. And then she came just frustrated. She's like, every time we can't go out to recess, everything breaks loose. All he can't handle it then, and that's when you start hearing things like, I'm not certified for this, the IEP's not working, right? We started getting that mode, and we just had to step back. And as I was talking to her, helping her understand, again, neurodivergent learning just means their brain processes information differently. So it's hard to process in the moment that I'm not going outside to recess like I expected that I would. So what the suggestion was to her was to listen, whenever you're not going to go outside for recess, if there's an inclination that you won't go, give them advance notice, and then at the same time give them a replacement activity. So when they come in the morning, hey, it's gloomy outside, we're most likely not going outside for recess today, but we can stay inside and you can play with the STEM buckets. Giving them that 3 hour notice is a lot better than when you think they think they're about to go line up for recess, and we're not going to do that, right? So giving the advance notice, again, predictability helps. He was still frustrated, but it wasn't meltdown frustrated. It wasn't throwing things across the classroom. It wasn't flipping desks. It was just anger that he got over it. He did like the STEM buckets, so that was okay for him to say, okay, we're not going outside, but I do still get to play with the STEM buckets, and that was all right transition. But do you notice how I'm saying that once we kind of understand that there are things that we can do to help prevent some of the behaviors that we see, and there are things that we can do to help the students feel safe and comfortable in the classroom. And that is ultimately the goal. So that is the second step to great sensory friendly classrooms. And I hope that you're receiving massive value from this. If you are, now's a great time to hit the like button, because what that actually does is it'll kind of let YouTube know that you like learning about things like this, and it'll continue showing videos like this, even if it's not from creators, even if it's not from me, other creators that are talking about similar topics, it'll show you. And definitely hit the subscribe button so that you will be notified when we come out with more information. The next thing that we said we're going to do is we're going to use clear communication strategies. Because when we're working with neurodivergent learners, we have to make sure that the expectations are clear. One of the things that we want to make sure we avoid is metaphors, phrases, and instead use direct language, right? So we don't want to say things like hit the books, because now in a neurodivergent brain that's taking things completely literally, I'm thinking, why do I need to hit my book? We can just say it's time to study. And I know that this sometimes gets really hard. We don't even recognize how many phrases, metaphors, and things like that that we actually use, but we do. We use a lot of them, right? So keep that in mind as you're communicating with our. You can also utilize some visual supports. So this kind of goes back to the universal design for learning, right? This kind of goes back to making sure that we're not just addressing one type of learning style, but we're also making sure that we are pairing them with images or videos or GIFs or things like that, because we want to make sure that they they can understand and have multiple representations of that level of information. Again, the whole goal is to be clear. So if we tell them circle up, maybe we have a picture on the board of students standing around in a circle, because maybe circle up in a neurodivergent brain doesn't make sense. Maybe they're like, what do you mean circle up? How do we circle up, right? But if you say circle up and have a picture on the board of students standing in the circle, then they say, okay, I need to look like that. And again, now that's going to help with it's going to aid where the teacher is saying they're not listening, they're not following directions. Maybe they just don't understand the expectation. Is that making sense? All right, you got this. There's just one more. Watch this. So then one other thing that we can do is we can make sure to chunk the information. Chunk the information. What do I mean when I say chunk the information? What I mean is we can break down the tasks into smaller, manageable steps. And I know my face is in the way right here, but smaller, manageable steps. So instead of giving them a full rundown of everything that needs to happen, we can just give them manageable steps of try this, do this first, do this next, do this last, right? Giving them small, manageable steps. And that's going to help it to be very successful. I will also say that we've created a clear framework that allows you to communicate with students every time. Because I noticed that sometimes I'll say things and teachers don't necessarily know how to enact it, or I'll give an example and they say, "Can you write that down?" Right. So I love creating frameworks, and I actually created the frame framework, which helps you give clear directions every time. The frame framework helps you give clear directions every single time, and we have that inside of our classroom management course that is accessible through in our impact community, and it is completely free for those that are in the community to download that framework, so that even with our neurodivergent learners, you can use that framework to give directions to make sure that they're understanding. Frame is an acronym that stands for, focused language, routine steps, actionable items. So it's a FRAME, right? In order to be able to make sure that we're giving students directions in such a way that they can understand it and that they can actually act on it because they understand the expectation. All right. So again, inside of Impact, you got that. It's yours. So I told you that they were going to be the three things, and I promise you, I always want to give you three things that you can enact in your classroom right now. If this is helpful, let me know in the comment section. These are three things that we can do right now. We can start using clear communication strategies, right? We can create a sensory friendly classroom, and we can make sure that we approach learning from various ways with the universal design for learning. But I wanted to make sure that I give you a bonus, and this bonus, nobody asked for it, but you need it. The bonus is to create a supportive classroom culture. What do I mean by that? A supportive classroom culture. You as the teacher are the moral authority in the classroom. And I'm gonna full screen myself right here because I need you to see me and I need you to understand what I'm saying. You as the teacher are the moral authority in that classroom, absolutely 100% guarantee. But you as the teacher are one of many in the classroom. Some of you have 16 students, some of you have 24, some of you have 35. But what happens, even if you master these things, what's going to happen when you turn your back? So what we've got to do is we've got to create a way to make sure that our students are supporting one another. So create a classroom environment where we're celebrating neurodiversity, right? We're celebrating our strengths. We're looking at all the things that we can do that are amazing. We're talking about how we can help one another. We're seeing how we can be the best version of ourselves. We're not just, maybe we don't just celebrate grades and accolades, but maybe we celebrate our artistic skills. Maybe we celebrate the things that we're doing outside of school. Maybe we have a shout out wall where somebody's talking about, what they're doing on their soccer team, or somebody is baking for their church. Like, we're talking about all the amazing things that our students are doing because we're recognizing what makes them amazing. Because what we want students to understand is that your differences are not your deficiencies. Your differences are not your deficiencies. So although there is neurodiversity among us, and although there are some neurodivergent students, there are some neurotypical students, what we really want students to understand is that there's not one that is better than the other. There are just differences, and our differences are not our deficiencies. That's what we've got to make sure that our students understand, that our differences are not our deficiencies. And if you feel like you can't make it, if you feel like this is too hard, if you feel like, I don't know if I can do this, I'm not certified, I'm not qualified, what you said is good, but I don't know if I'll be able to get the headphones, I don't know if I can listen, I want you to stop all that and ask yourself this question. Is there anybody else in the world that is doing this and doing it well? Is there anybody else in the world that is supporting neurodiversity in their classroom, in a general education classroom? Anybody else in the world? Because if so, that's just proof that it's possible. And what I always like to say, what I need you to understand, the last thing I need you to hear me say, for anybody who has a little bit of self-doubt, is that if it is possible, know that you are capable. If it is possible, know that you are capable. You can learn the skills that you need to learn. You can acquire the skills that you need to acquire in order to support neurodiverse learners in your classroom. If it is possible, you are capable. I appreciate you. I'm glad that you are here. Um, if you are interested, the link for Impact is down below. Now would be a good time to click it before the stream ends. In just a couple of minutes, we are going to head over to just an Impact only community group, and it's exclusive for Impact members. So Jasenia, I'll see you over there. And if there's anybody else, I'll see you over there. All right. If you have questions, now's what the time is for. I have about 15 minutes until I go into the Impact group. But I am here. If you don't have any questions, I just want to say I am super proud of you for sticking around, and I know that you can do this. All right, Nina said you liked it already. Awesome. I'm so glad. Shout out to you. All right. If you stuck around to the end, there, like, we started with 5, we ended with 5. I don't know if this is the same 5 we started with, but we've got 5 or 6 people on right now. If you have not subscribed yet, now would be a good time. If you spent the last 45 minutes with me, I think now is a good time to subscribe so that you can see more information that comes out. And if you enjoyed this, next week, we're actually going to dive into a new topic. There's something new every single week. So if you're just sitting back wondering, man, what else could he teach us? What else can I learn? Is there more? The answer is yes. Every week, I will be giving a new teaching. I've got a lot of information to share, and I want to make sure that you get it. So every week there's a new topic. Next Tuesday, 6:30 p.m. Eastern, same time, same place. Like, share, subscribe, invite a friend, see whatever it is. I'm so glad that you were there. Thank you for coming out, and I'll see you in the next video.